Hello, my educator family, and welcome to Strategy Sunday, right here with Carla Boswell-Lewis, Director for Strategic Educational Consultancy Services, on a mission to empower you, educators. This is our final in the series on alternative assessment, and we know that this has been going well so far based on your feedback and your comments. To wrap up this series, we have with us Mrs. Marsha Russell, who was the first runner-up in the LASCO Teacher of the Year competition for 2019-2020. She's also a science teacher at the Porus High School in Jamaica, and she's also a STEM ambassador, as she shares with us practical tips of implementing alternative assessment in the classroom. We encourage you to go and do likewise.
Good afternoon. The pleasure is mine to use this opportunity to talk to my fellow colleagues about authentic assessment. Authentic, when we hear the word authentic, what comes to mind? This is a term that is synonymous with students being asked to perform real-world tasks that demonstrate meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. Now, we are present in the COVID time, and as we know, a lot of us have to do virtual teaching. And while it might be new to some, it is quite familiar to others. But one thing that we have to emphasize is that with online learning, we have to dig a little deeper in terms of finding authentic assessment for our students. I would frame it by saying, help our students to see what is to be. Now, when we look again on authentic assessment, we have to ask ourselves, is this activity gearing our learners to think critically, higher order questions, and to analyze why they really understand the concept? Now, again, I would like to thank Ms. Boswell-Lewis for giving me this opportunity to share with you. But just to continue, I would like to share a particular slide to help us to see that it is imperative, very imperative for each and every one of us to remember that when we go back to all of these concepts of authentic assessment, we can't leave out Bloom's taxonomy. When we look on Bloom's taxonomy, we have to look on all the various levels, and we have to ask ourselves, does this help the students to remember, to understand, to apply, to analyze, to evaluate, and to create? But oftentimes our level, the level of assessment that we conduct tends to be at the lower order, where we are making them remember, understand, and apply. We want to see if we can come up to the last three tiers of analyzing, evaluating, and creating. But then again, let us look even further at the concept that students have to Maslow before they can bloom. We have to ensure that there is compassion and understanding in all that we do to allow the students to want to be engaged in all the activities that we are involved. Again, we have to emphasize compassion and understanding. Now, there are multiple challenges that we face. We have to look on the fact that we need to engage our students. We need to help and have that one-to-one dialogue with them. And one way we can do that is to simply have for an assessment a show and tell. You could be teaching a concept of a simple concept as natural cycles, where you look on carbon cycle, water cycle, nitrogen cycle, all these cycles. And instead of doing the regular teacher talk, you can divide your students in group in Google Classroom and have them present. And even to make it more impacting, they can put in videos and give their fresh understanding. Another way that you can incorporate the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy is to ask the students, if, for instance, they are selecting the nitrogen cycle, That student has to show how the nitrogen cycle plays an important role in, say, the agricultural components that are involved in their community. Do you have pea farmers? And if there are pea farmers there, how does the nitrogen cycle help? Or for a student who is doing food and nutrition, they have to ensure that they have a balanced diet. In having a balanced diet, you need to ensure that proteins are available. If proteins are available, and say, for instance, that person is not a fan of meat eating or tends to eat more of a plant-based diet, you can now make the connection between the nitrogen cycle and food consumption, helping that child to see the real world connection, because that is what is important in authentic assessment. It doesn't have to take the regular form of our multiple choice and fill in the blanks. We have to engage our students, communicate with them, cooperate with them to end up all of us having a meaningful learning experience. We need to ensure that we validate and make sure that all that is being learned is clear and without any inequalities. So if I'm giving an assessment, ensure that this assessment covers the tiers of my class. I know the different types of learners, so I need to ensure that the assessment that I'm giving to a particular class caters to the tactile learner, caters to the visual learner, all the tiers, and ensuring that we have differentiation in instruction. Moving on, one of the things we have to do is to make sure that we plan. If we don't plan, as it's said oftentimes, you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Now let's look on planning for assessment. One thing that we must ensure that we do is to focus on the formative. Don't sweat it. In this COVID time, there are a lot of things that we would have made mandatory in our face-to-face classes. But because of the nature of the learning, we have to think outside the box. We have to think on different ways and means to ensure that we get students to do the work. Because the truth is, I know from my personal experience, getting the work, giving the work is one thing, but getting back the work is also a next challenge. So we have to find ways and means of getting it to be very interactive for the students. The second thing we can do is to list the learning objectives. Make sure that at the start of your class, the child knows what is expected of him and her. They're aware of the things that are required, and at the end of the lesson, what they are able or should cover. We are to now tailor our expectations, stick to the essentials. In a lesson of, say, photosynthesis, you want the child to know that the basic raw materials of photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, water, with your helpers of chlorophyll. But we have to ensure that the main things are emphasized, because the level of attention that we have from our students at this time, and especially in the virtual situation, is limited. They are so stimulated by TikTok and music and videos and all the things that are around, that you're going to find that the teacher just coming and giving them the regular is just one of the regular mundane things for them. So we have to ensure that the limited attention span that we have with these students, we see as much as possible how we can stick to the main, reinforce the main, and hone in on those skills. Now, number 4, have a clear scoring rubric. I'm going to deal with this a little later when we talk about rubrics. And finally, mix it up. You don't always have to do a regular formatted assessment. It can be a story. They can dub poet. They can sing a song. They can construct a particular item and then carry it to your classroom. There are ways and means that we can make it fun. We can make it engaging for all our students. And finally, shift your focus. You need to guide. You need to give practice, you need to gain insight, and importantly, you need to do grading. Now let's go back to our rubric. Now, whenever we are doing a rubric for our classroom, we cannot have a rubric or give a student a particular assessment if we don't first define our goals and our goals will tie into our objectives. What was the purpose of this lesson? Let's give you an example. Again, I'm using the lesson, how plants use radiant energy. That is, we're going to go through the whole scenario of photosynthesis. Now, one of the simple lower order objectives that we could have is to list the raw materials of photosynthesis. Now, the children will simply recite that and give that back to us. But let's see if we can step it up and go into the level 3 and 4 or 5 and see if we can get them to really digest and absorb what we want to know. In a next case, we can use an objective where we ask the students to construct a model of a typical leaf using creative recycled material for part of the leaf. In this case, the child would have to go out there and get cardboard, various plant materials, use different materials to make their stem. They have to cut, color, draw, and make sure they take a picture, send that back to you, and be able to identify the parts and their function. Now, after the child does that, you can simply do, not the regular, you can do a crossword puzzle. Ask 4 or 5 questions pertaining to photosynthesis. And from this, they'll have to use the information that was learned in class, apply it in the crossword puzzle. It might be 4 or 5 questions. And I know sometimes we're used to the long meter, having 20 to 25 lessons, things and saying to ourselves, yes, this will work. But the truth is, based on the nature of what we're doing, I personally believe on making it short and spicy. You can have 2 assessments. You can have 2 very engaging activities for your students and use this to get out the main points of your lesson without having a long, laborious quiz or essay where they're doing 20 or more. Now, just to close before my time runs out, I want to tell you that when we're talking about rubrics, one of the things that we have to determine is whether we're going to make it a holistic or analytic type of rubric. I am more leaning to a holistic, but again, persons have their preference. Now, with the analytic, you use numbers. So you will range the criteria based on 1 to 5, for instance. Whereas for the holistic, you're looking on terms like exceptional, satisfactory, poor. Again, based on what you're teaching the student, you will know how to gauge your rubric. And most importantly, you can't give an assessment to a student and they're not sure of what you want. So for instance, in the example that I gave to you, you have the leaf. The child must know that at the end, I am expecting to 1, see recycled material. 2, the size of the leaf must be of such a nature that it can be seen readily by persons around. I have to ensure that am I going to expect all students to color? If not, if no marks are going to be given for color, I need to state that. If I'm going to expect creativity in terms of using different shapes and patterns of leaves, I need to tell that to the students. So you don't have everybody using one type of leaf, and then you're going to grade them differently based on the fact that this student used a more creative styles for leafing. Now, all of this goes into your rubric. And as I said before, a lot of assessment, a lot of what we're doing requires a significant amount of planning on the part of the teacher. So you will have to make sure that you assess your syllabus, know what is required, know what area of the Bloom's taxonomy you want to grab from the students, and then from this you can determine the best and the most appropriate rubric to use for your students. Again, in closing, remember, authentic assessment does not have to be my assessment. Authentic assessment does not have to be your assessment. Authentic assessment must involve real-world tasks that help not me, but the student to learn. Thank you again, Ms. Boswell-Lewis, for allowing me this opportunity to talk to our colleagues, and I do hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Russell, for sharing with us these practical and actionable tips that we can utilize in our classroom as we position our students for success and as we utilize authentic or alternative assessment in the classroom. Educators, if this video was beneficial to you or if you liked what you heard, go ahead and like the video. If you feel that there is a friend or educator who could use this type of information, or even a parent, go ahead and share the video. And if you want to get more videos with this kind of information and somehow you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Continue to share your thoughts in the comment section and give us your feedback on how it has been going for you thus far. Educators, on Sunday we will have our live that will be going on, and we invite you to come and be a part of it, sharing in the discussion and share with us your thoughts. See you on Thursday when we do Analysis Thursday. Educators, this is Strategic Educational Consultancy Services, and we're on the path, on the mission to empower you, educators. Have a great week ahead.